Hello students, in previous session we have taken the overview of CODA. In this unit we have studied the Hyperledger fabric, and then we have studied the CODA also, and we have to study Ripple. Ripple is a digital currency similar to the Bitcoin. So we have to understand the Ripple, its components. So you can see the syllabus of this unit 5. We are studying the last topic of this unit. We have to take the overview of Ripple. Ripple is a payment system and a digital currency which evolved completely independent of Bitcoin. So Ripple is a payment system. It is a digital currency which has developed independently, and Ripple holds second highest market cap after the Bitcoin. So Ripple is the second highest market holder in the currency market worldwide. So we have to understand this Ripple payment system. This Ripple payment system is also used for cross-border payments. It is like a Hawala system to transfer the money. So we have to understand the concept of this Ripple digital currency, Ripple digital payment system. So this Ripple uh, is introduced in 2012. Ripple is a currency exchange and real-time gross settlement system. So Ripple is a currency exchange system. So it is used for exchanging the current currency. It is also used for cross-border currency exchange. It is a real-time gross settlement system. In Ripple, the payments are settled without any waiting as opposed to the traditional settlement network. So if you want to do the cross-border payment in traditional banking system, we require 3 to 4 days, and if there are some errors, some faults, then it takes 15 to 20 days to settle the errors, to settle the faults. But the Ripple currency exchange system is faster as compared to the traditional currency exchange mechanism. So in Ripple, the payments are settled without any waiting as opposed to the traditional settlement networks where it can take days. It can take 3 to 4 days for settlement. So it has a native currency called Ripples. Ripple currency is called XRP. So as we call the Bitcoin currency as a Bitcoin, so Ripple currency is called XRP, or sometimes it is called as Ripples. So it has a native currency called Ripples, or you can say XRP. It also supports non-XRP payments. So it also supports the other payments apart from the Ripples or XRP. This system is considered similar to an old traditional money transfer mechanism known as Hawala. This mechanism of transfer in Ripple is considered as to be similar to an old traditional money transfer mechanism known as Hawala. This system works by making use of agents who take the money and password from the sender, and then contact the payee's agent and instruct them to release the funds to the person who can provide the password. The payee then contacts to the agent. The local agent tells them the password and collects the funds. So analogy to the agent is the gateway in Ripple. So in traditional Hawala system, the traditional Hawala system works by making the use of agents, and these agents are called gateway in Ripple. The analogy or the alternate word to the agents in the Ripple is gateway. This system works by making use of agents who take the money and password from the system. Hawala system works by making the use of payments who take the money and password from the sender, and then it will contact the page agent and instruct them to release the fund to the person who can provide the password. The pay then contact the local agent and tells them the password and collects the funds. So this is how the sender and receiver can transfer the money using the Hawala system, and similar kind of mechanism is used, but as this mechanism is autonomous, so as it seems similar to the Hawala, but it is somewhat complicated. So we will see how this Ripple works. In Ripple, instead of agents, we use the word gateway. So Ripple network nodes. The Ripple network node Ripple network is composed of various nodes that can perform different functions based on their types. So there are basically two types of nodes in Ripple network: user nodes and validator nodes. So user nodes. These nodes use in payment transactions and can pay or receive the payments. These user nodes are used in payment in transactions. These users can receive or transfer the money. So then second type of nodes in the Ripple network is validator nodes. These nodes participate in the consensus mechanism, or you can say agreement mechanism, and each server maintains a set of unique nodes. Each server has the set of unique nodes which it needs to query while achieving the consensus. Nodes in the unique node list are trusted by the server involved in the consensus mechanism. So unique nodes are involved in the consensus mechanism. Every server maintains the list of these unique nodes. Unique node list, that list is called unique node list, and these nodes will accept the server will accept votes only from the this list of unique nodes. So this consensus algorithm is based on majority voting. The server will accept the votes from unique nodes, and if it receives the certain number of votes, or you can say majority of nodes, then that transaction is finalized. So it is based on the concept of majority voting. The consensus mechanism is based on the concept of majority voting, and server maintains the list of unique nodes. These unique nodes only can vote because server trust on these nodes, and these nodes are involved in consensus mechanism, and server will accept the votes from the unique nodes, and if certain number of votes are received, then that transaction is finalized in the Ripple. Ripple network. Ripple network is sometimes not considered a truly decentralized network, as there are network operators and regulators involved. So it is not considered to be a decentralized network in true sense, because it consists of network operator and regulators as opposed to the blockchain. However, it can be considered decentralized due to the fact that anyone can become part of the network by running the validator node. So any node can become a part of the network by running the validator node, and moreover, the consensus process is also decentralized, because any changes proposed to make on the ledger have to be decided by the scheme of supermajority voting. So the consensus is achieved by the scheme of majority voting. If the server receives the majority of votes, then that transaction is accepted, otherwise the transaction is rejected. So consensus process is decentralized process as in the Ripple. Ripple maintains a globally distributed ledger of all transactions and that are governed by a novel low latency consensus algorithm called Ripple protocol consensus algorithm. The consensus process works by achieving an agreement on the states of an open ledger containing transaction by seeking verification and acceptance from validating nodes in an iterative manner until an adequate number of votes are achieved. So the transaction is committed only if it receives adequate number of votes through the consensus mechanism, or we can say from the validated nodes, or we can say a unique nodes, or we can say validator. So once enough votes are received, a super majority initially 50%. So initially that majority voting is considered as 50% and gradually increasing with each iteration up to at least 80%. And if it receives at least 80% votes, the changes are validated and the ledger is closed. So the consensus protocol is a three-phase process. There are three pages in the consensus protocol of Ripple: collection phase, consensus phase, and ledger closing phase. So we will see these phases one by one. So first is collection phase. In this phase, validating nodes gather all transactions broadcasted on the network by account owners and validate them. So first phase, the unique nodes, or you can say validating nodes, will gather all the transactions broadcasted on the network, and these unique nodes or validating nodes will validate the transaction. Transactions once accepted are called candidate transactions and can be accepted or rejected based on the validation criteria. Then next stage is consensus phase. So after the collection phase, after the transactions are collected, transactions are validated, and candidate transactions are created. Then after collection phase, the consensus process starts, and after achieving consensus, after achieving the consensus mechanism, the ledger is closed. Ledger closing phase. Then last phase is ledger closing phase. This process runs asynchronously every few seconds in rounds, and as a result, the ledger is opened and closed accordingly. And after storing the transaction, ledger is closed and it is again open if it receives the transactions. And then Ripple components. Ripple has different components. And the first component is the server. This component serves as a participant in the consensus protocol. Ripple server software is required in order to be able to participate in the consensus protocol. This server is responsible for executing the consensus protocol. It has the list of unique nodes or validating nodes. Then second component of the Ripple is ledger. This is the main record of balances of all accounts on the network. So this ledger stores the state of the system. A ledger contains various elements such as ledger number, account settings, transactions, timestamp, and flag that indicates the validity of the ledger. And next component is last closed ledger. A ledger is closed once the consensus is achieved by the validating nodes, or we can say unique nodes. Then next component of the Ripple is open ledger. This is a ledger that has not been validated yet, and no consensus has been reached about its state. Each node has its open ledger which contains proposed transaction. Then next component is unique node list. This is the list of unique trusted nodes that a validating server uses in order to seek the votes and subsequent consensus. So this unique nodes only can vote, and if adequate number of votes are received from unique nodes, then that transaction is committed. Then next component in the REPL is proposer. As the name suggests, this component proposes a new transaction to be included in the consensus process. So it is usually a subset of nodes that can propose the transaction to the validating server. Transactions are created by the network users in order to update the ledger. A transaction is expected to be digitally signed and valid in order for it to be considered as a candidate in the consensus process, and each transaction costs a small amount of XRP, or we can say Ripple, which serves as a protection mechanism against the denial of service attacks caused by the spamming. So each transaction costs a small amount of Ripple, or we can say XRP, which serves as the because of this amount, the fraudulent nodes will not participate in the consensus mechanism. They will not propose the transaction because of the charges or fees for the transactions. So transactions are created by the network users in order to update the ledgers, and the ledger is updated via the consensus process. Consensus process is run by the server, and server has the list unique nodes for validating the transaction. And for validating the transaction, the server needs adequate number of votes, and if it receives adequate number of votes, or you can say majority of votes, then that transaction is committed. Transaction processing. Transactions are executed by using 4-step process. So we can see how the transactions are processed in the REPL network. First, transactions are prepared, whereby an unsigned transaction is created by the following standards. So as per the standards, the unsigned transaction is created. The second step is signing, where the transaction is digitally signed to authorize it. And third step is, after the signing the transaction, the transaction is actually submitted to the network via the connected server. And finally, the verification is performed. The server will verify the transaction, and it will perform a consensus mechanism. It will use the consensus mechanism to finalize the transaction. So how the consensus mechanism works, that already we have studied. It is based on the super majority votes. If it receives adequate number of votes, certain number of votes from the unique nodes, then that transaction is accepted, otherwise the transaction is rejected. So last step of this transaction processing is the verification is performed to ensure that the transaction is validated successfully. So transaction processing has first 4 steps. First, the transactions are prepared. The transactions are unsigned transaction that is created as per the standards. The second step is signing, where the transaction is digitally signed to announce it, and after this the actual submission to the network occurs via the connected server. The transaction is submitted to the server for finalization. A server will run a consensus mechanism, and it will use the unique nodes to validate the transaction. And if certain number of votes, if majority of votes are received, and then that transaction is accepted, that transaction is finalized. So this is how the REPL network works. And then there is one concept, interledger protocol. This interledger layer protocol is a blockchain protocol used for payments across different payment networks. So the open source protocol connects the ledgers from 2 or more banks. If we want to do the cross border payments, if we want to exchange the payment, then this REPL uses the interledger layer protocol to connect 2 or more different banks using this interledger layer protocol. So this is the open source protocol that connects the ledgers from 2 or more different banks, and thereby removing the intermediaries and central authorities from the system. So as I said, this is a currency exchange mechanism. It can use for exchanging the currency or for cross-border payments to transfer the funds in different countries, as the Hawala system works. It is cheaper as compared to the Hawala. It promises, this Ripple promises to reduce the cost and time required to process the cross-border payments. So this is the benefit of the Ripple as compared to the Hawala. It promises to reduce the cost and time. The transactions are settled immediately in Hawala system, or we use the traditional banking system for cross-border payments. It requires 3 to 5 days to settle the payments, and if errors occur, if there is some fault, then settlement time is more than 15 to 20 days. By using the Ripple and by using this interledger layer protocol, time required to process the cross border payments is very less, and also the fees, the charges required for transferring, for exchanging the money is less. So this protocol is used by the Ripple ILP protocol, or we can say interledger layer protocol. It is used by the Ripple Labs to connect the bank system across the borders in its Ripple XRP digital Hawala service and other cryptocurrency products. So we will see how this ILP protocol works in the next slide. So you can see, students, how this ILP interledger layer protocol works. So the interledger protocol uses the concept of cryptographic escrow. This is the new concept, escrow. The interledger protocol uses the concept of cryptographic escrow to enable passage of funds through the connectors or nodes in the networks. So protocol consists of two steps. The first step consists of defining a set of conditions for a transaction to move forward or abort. So first step in the protocol consists of defining a set of conditions, business conditions, parameters for a transaction to move forward or abort. And second step defines the processing of the transactions once the conditions are met. This is like a smart contract. We know that in smart contract, the transactions are processed only if certain business conditions are met. So cryptographic escrow for ledgers is the conditional locking of funds between two parties. The funds are released only after certain conditions, including time based ones for the transaction to take place are met. So this escrow is is similar to the smart contract, which cryptographic escrow that verifies the condition. The cryptographic escrow for ledgers is the conditional locking of the funds between two parties. Then the funds are released only after certain conditions, including time based ones for the transaction to take place are met. Otherwise, the transaction is voided, the transaction is rejected. At the end of a successful payment transaction, the sender receives a cryptographic receipt from the recipient. So once the payment is settled through the Ripple network by using this interledger layer protocol, then the sender receives a cryptographic receipt of the payment, and that is considered that the payment is settled, the transaction is settled. So this is how the cross-border payments are processed in the Ripple. So students, here is the end of unit 5. So in this unit we have studied the hyperledger architecture, various design goals of hyperledger, components of hyperledger, then architecture of hyperledger that we have studied, then we have studied a CODA, and at the end of unit we have studied the Ripple also. So here is the end of this unit 5. So one more unit we have to study, that is unit 4. Unit 4 is nothing but the different use cases of blockchain, or you can say different applications of the blockchain, where we can use the blockchain, real world applications for we can use the blockchain for different applications like cross-border payments, then for mortgages, for healthcare applications, for know your customers. So these topics we have to study. These are the very simple applications. So uh, we have to study the different use cases and how the know your customer, cross border payments and mortgages over the blockchain, such type of operations are done using the blockchain technology, that we have to study in the unit 4. So unit 4 is related to the different enterprise applications of the blockchain. So these are the application. So I have taken this unit 5 before the unit 4 because this is the technology. In unit 5 there are different technologies like Hyperledger Fabric, Coda and Ripple. So I wanted to finish the technologies first, and then I wanted to discuss the applications at the end of the all the units. I have rescheduled unit 4 and unit 5. I have taken unit 5 first, and then we will uh, study the unit 4. Now we have to study the unit 4 that includes the enterprise or different applications of blockchain. So this is very general topics, what techniques we use for know your customer, cross border payments, then for trading, and for other applications how the blockchain and blockchain technology can be used, how it can be such kind of enterprise, such kind of businesses benefit from the blockchain, that we have to study. So here we will stop here. Thanks for watching session. So in next few sessions, the syllabus of this blockchain technology will get completed.